to Perek, and the Perek is the Shiras Devaira, the great song of Devaira, celebrating the victory over Sisera and Yavin, and both Perek Dalet, the war against Sisera, and Perek is the Haftarah for Parshas B'Shalach, which talks about Kriyas Yamsuf, because there's going to be a parallel. Just as the miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf resulted in Oz Yashir Maisha, so too the miracle of the defeat of Sisera results in a Shiras Devaira. That's why it's actually the longest Haftarah of the year, because it is both the story of the Milchama and the story of the Shira. Now the Shiras Devaira is written in a special way. Chazal say that all Shira, like Oz Yashir as well, is written Ariach al Gabe Levana. That means a half brick on top of a whole brick. And if you look at either Mikros Gedolos that's properly formatted, or you look at a klaf of Nevi'im, which many shuls use for Haftarahs, particularly in Yerushalayim, you will see that you will have on one line, you'll have one word, and under that there will be a longer phrase. So it looks like a short brick on top of a long brick, short brick on top of a long brick, and that'll be in two columns, as it were. And because it is nevuah and it is also poetry, sometimes the Lashon is a little difficult to understand. I will generally simply be following the commentary of the Mitzudas, adding it with a few Mamorei Chazal. And Perek reads, Vatasher Devaru Barak ben Avinayam, B'yemahu Lemar, that both Devaira and Barak, now this again is a miracle, they simultaneously came up with the same words. You have two people singing praises to Hashem, and they come up with the same thing. And it begins, B'fraya para'is b'Yisrael. When there is wars or tribulations against Am Yisrael. That's going to happen all the time. When there will be enemies that will bring tsaras upon us. B'hisnadevam. But the Jewish people come forward and devote themselves with Mesiras Nefesh. So there's heroism, and there's Jewish heroism. But we have to remember, Baruch Hu Hashem, bless God. Meaning, yes, there is Jewish heroism. The Chayalim are deserving of admiration. Hakara Satov. And this is a relevant message even for today. One has to be Makir Tov to the IDF. But, above all, never forget to give credit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now she turns, Shimu Malachim Hazinu Reisnim, all of you kings of the world, Rosnim, princes of the world, who glorify in your wealth and in your power and in your army. I want you to know, Anoichi Lashem, I give everything to Hashem. Anoichi Ashira, I sing only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Azamer Lashem Elokei Yisrael, I give my praises not to the army and not to the wealth and not to the politics and not to the alliances, but my song is to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now she goes back and she describes an earlier revelation of Hashem's divine presence. And the Mefarshim say that the earlier revelation that she's describing is actually Matan Torah. So she's hearkening back to Matan Torah. And you'll see in a moment how that works. That's a little shver, because one might say, what's the shaykhus of Matan Torah to the war against Sisera, which happened hundreds of years later? And the short answer is that, again, Devaira is attributing our victories to the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu we have via the Torah. And she says, Pasuk Dalet, Hashem b'tseischa miSeir. When you left Mount Seir to the south of Eretz Yisrael, b'tzadcha mistei Edom, when you were stepping from the fields of Edom, again Mount Seir. Eretz ra'asha, the very earth trembled as you walked. Gam shamayim natafu, and the sky was dripping water. Now that's rain, but the mashal is that kind of fear. Gam avim natfu mayim, the very clouds were dripping with water. Harim nazlu mipnei Hashem. The mountains were melting because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Zeh Sinai. And this was Mount Sinai. Mipnei Hashem Elokei Yisrael, because of the glory of God. So the psukim are very obscure here. But Chazal say that this is actually describing, says the famous Medrash, that before HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Am Yisrael the Torah, he offered the Torah to many, many nations, including Esav. And each nation asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's written in the Torah? And Hashem told Bnei Yishmael, do not steal. They said, well, we can't live with that one. And then he told Bnei Esav, do not kill. And they said, well, we can't keep that either. So this is the reference. Hashem went to Seir, went to Edom. He offered them the Torah. They refused. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew he had to go to Bnei Yisrael, because Bnei Yisrael didn't ask any questions. Hashem offers them the Torah and they say, Naseh v'nishma, we will do and then we'll hear what it is. We accept even without listening. So in a sense, Devaira is also not only praising Hashem, she's praising Am Yisrael. That you left Edom, you left Seir, and the whole world was trembling in your glory. The sky was sweating, so to speak. The mountains were melting. These are metaphoric ways of speech. Because of your glory, Hashem. And yet we were zocher to get that Torah. So that's kind of a little bit of a difficult digression to discuss Matan Torah. But then Devaira moves back to the present moment. Bimei Shamgar ben Anat, in the days of my predecessor Dayan, Shamgar ben Anas. Bimei Yael, in the days of Yael. Again, a little unusual because Yael was not a judge. But she says Yael lived through this. Chodlu arachot. An orach is an open pathway. Chodlu arachot means people were afraid to travel because there was so much harassment, so much violence from the soldiers of Yavin and Sisera that people were scared. They stayed in their houses. Chodlu arachot. The pathways of travel ceased. Holchein nesivos, and those who had to travel on the highways. Yelchu orchot akalkalot. They had to use side roads and pathways that weren't used. They couldn't walk on the main roads because there would be marauders, there would be criminals. Right? So these the armies of Yavin were not just regular soldiers; they were essentially hooligans and thugs. Chodlu prazon b'Yisrael chodelu. Openness ceased in Am Yisrael. People were scared. They wouldn't walk outside. Ad shekamti devaira shekamti ein b'Yisrael. Again, it's a little difficult because here Devaira seems to be praising herself. Until I arose in Am Yisrael. I was a mother bringing her children back to Hashem. Yivchar Elohim Chadoshim Oz Lachem Shiorim. Again, a difficult pasuk, but the Metzudah says this means Yivchar Elohim Chadoshim. When he chooses new gods to worship, he is the Jewish people. When the Jewish people choose, so to speak, new gods, small g, and reject God, what's going to happen is Lachem Sha'arim, there will be war in their gates. God will bring the enemy upon them. You reject Hashem, you're vulnerable to the enemies. Magain im Yera'eh v'romach bi'arboim elef b'Yisrael. And then even if you have an army of 40,000, of course Barak's army was only 10,000, you will not have spears, you will not have shields. You won't be able to defend yourself. Meaning, without Hashem, you can have a huge army, and your weapons aren't going to work. Yivchar Elohim Chadashim, you choose a new God, there's going to be war, there's going to be problems. Now Devorah turns and praises the Jews who volunteered to fight. Libi l'chokeke Yisrael, my heart goes out to the lawgivers of Yisrael, the Dayanim, the Shoftim, the Talmidei Chachamim, who teach Am Yisrael Torah and bring them to tshuva, because that gives them the courage to fight the milchamos of Hashem. So it's interesting that she's makir, that it's the kayach of Torah that gives the kayach of milchama. Hamisnadvim bi'am borchu Hashem. Rochvei asonos sechoros, those who ride white donkeys. Again, the idea was that obviously Dayanim had to travel around to different places to adjudicate. Not everybody was able to go to a central place. And they would ride the white donkeys, which were very good traveling animals. So it's really a kinoi for Dayanim. Yeshvei al midin, those who sit in judgment. Hochei al derech, all the people who are now able to walk on the highways. Sicho. Give a sicha, give a conversation about the chesed of Hashem. Mikol mechatzatzim bein mashavim. Instead of the voices of arrows attacking people when they're drawing water, meaning you couldn't even draw water safely. There would be arrows shooting, snipers. Instead of the mechatzatzim bein mashabim, instead of the arrows among the water drawers, Sham Yisanu Tzidkos Hashem. Now they can proclaim the righteousness of God. Tzidkos Pirzono b'Yisrael. The righteousness of His opening up Am Yisrael. People can leave their homes. They can go outside. They can go in the public. Again, I can't help thinking a little bit that now that the corona restrictions are being eased, we also have this sense that we can go out again. And that's also HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Rachamim and Tzidkus. But the pasuk itself is obviously referring to the fear of Milchama being taken away. Az yardu lasha'arim am Hashem. And then the nation of God can go down to the gates of their cities and leave those gates. Uri, Uri, Devaira. So she's now calling on herself to be inspired. Awake, awake, Devaira. Let my soul become awakened and alive. Uri, Uri, Dabri Shir. Speak the words of poetry that come to you b'nevuah. And then she turns to her collaborator and her husband, Barak. Kum Barak. Arise, Barak. Shavei Shivacha ben Avinoam. Capture those that you have to capture, son of Avinoam. Oz, Yerad Sarid Liadirayam. So Yerad, which is connected to Yerida, but it also refers to rule over somebody. When you rule over somebody, you put them in a subordinate position. So Yerad Sarid La'adirim means the small remnant of Am Yisrael. Yerad can now subjugate Adirim, the mighty nation. Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yerad li bagiborim. Give me the power to subjugate the mighty warriors. And now she praises the different tribes, because although, this is interesting, it wasn't recorded in the Milchama, although the only tribes that were commanded to participate were Zavulun and Naphtali, there were other volunteers who joined Barak's army. And in particular, Devaira singles out for praise Ephraim, Binyamin, and part of Menashe, as well as Yisachar. Mini Ephraim, from you, Ephraim, Shorsham bi'Amalek, your roots in war go all the way back in the Midbar, when Amalek was the first nation that attacked us. And who led the war against Amalek? Yeshua bin Nun, from the tribe of Ephraim. So you, Ephraim, your route to wage the wars of Hashem goes all the way back with Amalek. And Acharecha, and after you, Binyamin bi'amamecha. Binyamin followed your people. Mine Machir, and then the sons of Machir, Menashe, Yardu Mechaikekim. The lawgivers encouraged people to come. Now then it mentions Zevulun, which is a little schwer for me, because Zevulun was commanded, but she's kailel praise for Zevulun, Zevulun, and from the tribe of Zevulun. Meishchim b'shevet sofer, even those who pull the staff of the Sefer, meaning the writing of the Sefer, meaning even the Talmidei Chachamim. Again, there are interesting repercussions here, but Devorah is emphasizing that the people who came from Zevulun were the Sephrim, the scribes, the learned people. And then the tribe of Yisachar, that Lagamri was a tribe of Talmidei Chachamim. V'sarai b'Yisachar, and the princes of Yisachar came with Devorah. V'Yisachar came Barak, and Yisachar joined Barak. B'Emek, Shulach v'Raglav, and he sent forth the soldiers to fight Sisera in the valley of Nach al-Kishay. So on one hand, she praises Ephraim, she praises Binyamin, she praises part of Menashe. We'll see. She praises Zevulun, she praises Yisachar. But now she is very critical of tribes that were indifferent to the plight of Am Yisrael. Biflagos Reuven, but among the divisions of Reuven, Gedalim Chikekei Lev, great was the hesitations of the heart. Remember that Reuven lived the east bank of the Jordan. They already were sent home. Yoshua sent them home. We read at the end of Yoshua, because the basic wars of conquest were completed. But now there is a new crisis. And in that new crisis, Reuven debated, discussed, agitated, ruminated. So many hesitations. And they did nothing. And Devorah says to Reuven, or about Reuven, Lama yashavta beina mishpasayim. Why were you sitting in the cattle corrals? Remember that Bnei Reuven had a lot of sheep. Lishmaya sharikai sadarim. Were you so interested in listening to the bleating, the bahas of your sheep? And she repeats with slightly different wording, Liflagais Reuven, the divisions of Reuven, Gedalim Chikrei Leiv, all of the investigations, all of your debating, all of your discussions. Wonderful, wonderful discussions. But where was the Lamaisa? And then similarly, Gilad. Now Gilad was the part of Ever Liardain that was controlled by Gad and the Chatzi Shevet Menashe. And they, in other words, everybody east of the Jordan didn't come. So the praise of Menashe before was the half that was on the west side of the Yarden. The part that was on the east, they didn't come. Gilad, Ever Yarden, and you stayed Ever Liardain. And now she goes back and criticizes Dan on the Mediterranean coast. Vidan, Lama Yogoranios, why are you in your boats on the Mediterranean coast? And Asher, Yashav Lechof Yamim. Asher too is, right, Dan is the southern Mediterranean coast. Asher is the northern coast, north of Haifa. But apparently those that are on the seacoast didn't bother to fight the wars in the interior, Nach al-Kishon and Mount Tabor. L'chof Yamim, Asher dwelt on the seashore, V'al Mivtzarav Yashkon, and he dwelt in his open cities because he had no fear of attack, because Yavin was not going to go all the way to the coast. So there is tremendous criticism of Reuven, Gad, Chatzi Shevet Menashe, Dan, and Asher. But going back to Zevulun and Naphtali, but Zevulun, Am Cherif Nafshay Lamus. Zevulun was willing to put his own life in danger, as well as Naphtali, Al Maraime Sada. Naphtali was at the very heights of Mount Tavar. He was protected, and he went down from Mount Tavar to fight the enemy. Now, I do have a kasha here. I don't have a yisha for it, and that is, so Devorah mentions some tribes that joined, and she singles them out for praise. and she mentions a few tribes that did not join, and she singles them out for opprobrium. But there are some tribes she doesn't mention. Not every tribe is mentioned over here. So, for example, let's see, when you read Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yehuda's not mentioned, for example. I mean, did Yehuda join or did Yehuda not join? I don't know. So it's a little difficult. She mentions some that joined and some that didn't. And then some tribes are not mentioned at all, so it's a bit of a tzarachian about those other tribes. And now she says, going back and describing the war, Bo Malachim Nilchamo, the kings came against us to fight. Oz Nilchamo Malchei Canaan. In other words, Yavin got many kings to join him. B'Tanach, in the town of Tanach, Almei Megiddo, near the waters of Megiddo. The waters of Megiddo is Lake Chula, which no longer exists. That is a lake that is north of Yam Kinneret, that the Israeli government drained because of mosquitoes in the 1950s. But those are the waters of Megiddo. And they were so anxious to fight us. Betza Kesef Lo Lakachu. Sisra or Yavin didn't even have to pay him. They joined. When it comes to a fighting against the Jews, they'll go for free, just like Achashverosh. Haman wanted to pay him off. Achashverosh says, you don't have to give me any money. And what happened was, in spite of this huge army against us, Min hashamayim nilchamu atechavim b'mesilosam nilchamu in Sisra. The very stars in Shamayim fought against Sisra. Again, the kochavim, so to speak, were arranged in such a way that it caused rain and storm and confusion and mudslides, and people were trapped in Nach Kishain. So that's described as the very heavens were fighting against Sisra. Nachal Kishon Gerafam. Nachal Kishon, they got stuck and swept away in the river currents. That was part of the confusion. Nachal Kishon swept them away. Nachal Kedumim, Nachal Kishon. Nachal Kishon is a very old river, but not very big. But it was created for this very moment. Tidrechi nafshi oz. My soul can step on the ground with strength because of what Hashem enabled the Nachal Kishon to do. Oz halmu ikvei sus. And the hooves of the horses trying to escape got broken and smashed because they were stuck in that mud. Mi daharos abirav, from the strong pounding of the mighty soldiers who were trying to push the horses out of there. And they couldn't move. And as a result, their hooves got ruined and smashed. Now Devorah then says, Oru Meiroz Omar Malach Hashem. Behold, the angels of HaKadosh Baruch Hu say, Meiroz should be cursed. Now, Meiroz was presumably a Jewish city that was near the site of war, and they refused to participate. We don't know what tribe they were, but Devorah singles out this city for a curse. Orur Yoshveh, the inhabitants of Meiroz should be cursed. Ki lo bo li'azras Hashem, they did not come to help Hashem, meaning Hashem's people. Li'azras Hashem, to help HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol, Bagibayrim, against the mighty soldiers. They're cursed. And on the other side, Tevorach minashim Yael, very famous pasuk, Eishes Chever Hakeni. May Yael be blessed among all, the wife of Chever Hakeni be blessed among all women. Minashim bi'ayel tevarech, may she be blessed from the women that are in the tent. And again, Rashi says that this is a reference to the Imahos, right, who were very tsanua in the Ayel. We have Sarah and Rivka, Rachel and Leah. May Yael be considered to be one of those Imahos bi'ayel. Mayim sha'al, when Sisra asked for water, Chalav nesana, she gave him milk to get him drunk and be able to kill him. B'seifel adirim ikriva chema, in a sefel, in a cup that you would give to the mighty hero, she brought him cream. Chema does not mean butter here, it means cream, a fermented milk. Yada la yaseh tishlachna. She sent forth her hand to the tent stake. Mina la halmosa melim. And in her right hand she grasped the hammer blow of the worker. Vahalma Sisra, and she smashed Sisra. Macha karosho, she split his head. Machatza v'chalfa rakaso, she divided up his temples. Bain ragleha kara nafal shochav. Between her legs, he first crouched, ready as he was gradually falling. Nafal, he fell. Shochav, he was lying on the ground. Bain ragla, between her legs. Kara nafal, basher kara, as he crouched. Sham nafal shadud, he fell and was plundered. Now, the Gemara in Nazir has a very, very interesting and difficult comment. The Gemara explains that the Devaira here is alluding to the fact that in order to get him tired and even weaker than he was, Yael actually had intercourse with him 7 times. When it says he fell between her legs, it is not referring to him falling after she hit him on the head, but it refers to the fact that she had tashmish with her. That's the reference between her legs. And the Gemara in Nazir develops the very difficult idea that Yoel did a tremendous Aveira, having intercourse with a goy. Again, this depends if Yoel was Jewish or not. If she wasn't Jewish, it actually would not have been an Aveira. If she was Jewish, then of course it would be an Aveira. But this was what is called an Aveira l'shem shamayim, an Aveira l'shma, doing an Aveira without any personal gratification, doing the Aveira only to be Matzal Am Yisrael. And since the Aveira praises this action, you see that an Aveira that is totally L'Shem Shamayim can be as great as a mitzvah. The Gemara initially said, as great as a mitzvah L'Shem Shamayim, but the Gemara then qualified it. It's as, an Aveira L'Shma is as great as a mitzvah Shalo L'Shma. On the other hand, Rav Chaim Volozhiner tells us that Bizman Hazeh, it is not possible for us to do Aveiros L'Shem Shamayim, because by definition, there is going to be some type of gratification that we get. So this was a unique Aveidah that only Yael was able to do. But this is the makor for the concept of Aveiro L'Shma. And then, the Devaira says, Bi'ad ha'chalain nishkafa, v'tiyabei be'im Sisra bi'ado eshnav. She's describing Sisra's mother waiting for her son to come back. What's taking him so long? She's looking out of the window. V'tiyabei, and she's crying. Madua boshe shrichbo lavo. Why is it taking so long for his chariot to come back? Madua acharu pamei markavosav. The steps of his chariots are late. What's taking him so long? She doesn't know that he's dead. And chachmo soroseh tanena, and the wisdom of her princesses and her attendants answer, oh, he's taking time to get the spoils of war. Anafi tashiv amarala, and she said it herself. I shouldn't worry about him being late. Halo yimtzu yechalku shalo. Behold, they are dividing the spoils of war. Racham asayim l'rosh gever. Rechem means a uterus, a womb, meaning they're taking women for their sexual perversions, as well as shalal savaim, and colored garments for Sisra. Shalal savaim rikma, beautiful clothing of embroidery. Seva rikmasayim, colored embroidery, l'tzavrei shalal, from the necks of those that he killed. But she's wrong. That's not what happened. So again, the point that Devaira is making is, and a bit sarcastically, that Sisra's mother is not thinking about her son. She's thinking about all of the goodies that he's going to bring back from the war, which he does not. I want to point out one thing. We know that the minhag on Rosh Hashanah, although it's a minhag, it's not a chiyuv per se, but it's a minhag in Klal Yisrael, is that although d'oraisa you only have to blow the shofar 9 times, tekiah, trua, tekiah 3 times with different variations, that gives you 30 times. But the minhag is we blow the shofar 100 times. And that's because the remez is that Sisra's mother cried for her son 100 sobs. And even the crying of a Rasha, when a mother cries over a child, that awakens divine mercy. But the divine mercy against the the divine mercy for the benefit of the Rasha, turns out to be against us. So we have to counteract the crying of Sisra, the Sisras of the world, the mothers of the terrorists, with our own crying and our own broken heart, as if to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't look at those cries, look at our cries. And that is interesting because the word vatiyabeb, crying, is the same word in the Targum as trua. Trua also means crying, and therefore our trua and our tekiah counteracts the crying of Ein Sisra. And Devorah ends her song, Kain Yavdu Kol Yavecha Hashem. May all of your enemies, God, be destroyed, because those who are enemies against Am Yisrael are not just our enemies, they're your enemies. V'ohavav, and those who love Hashem, Kitseis Hashemesh b'gvuraso, they shall shine like the sun at its strongest point, which of course is high noon. And that is the end of the Song of Devorah. And the footnote to the song is that Devorah initiated a period of peace. Now this means both in Ruchnias and in Gashmias, of Shmiras HaMitzvahs, of Torah learning. Tishkai Ta'aretz Arbaim Shana. That following the overthrow of Yavin and the destruction of Sisra, there was a peaceful era of 40 years. And then, of course, once again, we're going to see that we get spoiled, we get complacent, we fall back into our bad habits, and that is the end of Shiras Devorah.